Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. And up next, a look at running form, what it tells us, and what we can do about it. And after that, World of Running updates about Diamond League, chasing standards, and the Queen of Ultras. We're back and glad you're with us and back with us. And we're glad that you are thinking about a question that you want to share and ask so that we can feature it at our end of month Q&A, which is happening next week.
Woo!
So
already? Oh no, it's the end of July.
It's very nearly, but that's not what this is about, Andy. This is about the Q&A, which is
it's about
great.
The Q&A. Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. I won't dwell on the fact that summer is just going by so fast.
Stop saying such things. Now, you need to go to AtoZrunning.com/question to submit your question, share your question or questions. It doesn't have to be just one. You can say, hey, I have a few different questions. We might pick one. We might answer a couple. We might pick one and then answer another time. So ask away. AtoZrunning.com/question.
Yep. Next part, we have shout outs because Zach did a race this weekend and you got to talk to some people.
Well, it wasn't just at the race, actually. I just happened to be talking to lots of you randomly in the recent past, and it was fun and exciting, and I wanted to at least give a couple shout outs because it's always when you extend you put yourself out there and say, hey, you must be that person from that thing, that's always a little bit of chutzpah, and so thank you. I don't know, it takes a little something, and I don't know what that something is. Yeah, gumption, that's a better one. Chutzpah or gumption. Well, shout out to Diana, I think that was your name. Apologies if I got it wrong, because you sold me some shoes, which is always wonderful, and she runs for Ferris, and so good luck in your upcoming season, and thanks for mentioning that you know about us and the conversation. That was very fun. And then also, while at the race then, so I was buying those shoes the day before the race. I may or may not have been making that terrible decision that some of us make where I was thinking, I might buy some shoes right now for tomorrow's race.
We always recommend not doing that.
No, but
the do as I say, not as I do.
There's a reason why for this particular run it wasn't all that concerning, because it doesn't matter really what shoes you wear in this kind of a race. It's going to be awful either way. So I ran this race. This is the RTS in West Michigan. That stands for Road, Trail, Sand. So you run on all three of those surfaces, most of it on sand, on a beach.
It's very difficult
with
to do
dunes, big ones that are steep, and you have to go up and down them. So it's very difficult. It's actually probably the most unpleasant race I have ever
But
run.
You think it's beautiful, right?
Well,
like there's
beautiful,
a lot of good things about it.
I don't really care much about the beauty of things when I'm racing, but it's fun for the challenge if you like those kinds of challenges. I'm not sure that I do, but it's still fun being with you all and doing things like that. So
at least we're suffering together.
It's good. It's good. It's very well, of course it's fun because the race sells out every year. So clearly people are, intrigued by these challenges. Well, shout out to Mike, who was intrigued by this challenge specifically because he saw our video about this event from last year. If you don't recall, I have occasionally run races with a GoPro in hand and recorded footage of the race as well as me talking about what I'm actually trying to do, decisions I'm making during the race, like real time play-by-play. We've got a few of those out there. We've done some 5Ks, some marathons, some 10Ks in this case because that's what the distance is. Well, Mike saw our video about this event and thought, oh, that looks like an interesting event. I want to try it. I'm not quite sure why, Mike, you thought that it was interesting from the video because I specifically say in the video that it's terrible. But clearly he rose to the challenge. And I talked to him after the race, and he was still excited about it. So that's a good sign.
That's a very good sign.
That's great. Nice work, Mike.
Was it more difficult, Zach, because it had rained that morning?
I think it was. Did
it rain during the race?
I spoke to race director Josh afterward, and my impression was, because usually you think that rain actually helps a sand race because the wet sand, it gives you a little bit more traction. I think it actually was worse in this instance because what it did is it created a more like a mud effect at times where you were like getting stuck. So not only were your feet barely pushing because the sand was giving way as you're stepping, but then you also got a little stuck in it sometimes. I don't know. Maybe not. But
did it rain during the event?
No, just
That's
apparently
nice.
before.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so also a shout out to Lily, who ran her first ever RTS race at the age of somewhere in middle school. And so that's not easy to do. Lily, you can now claim what very few other middle school runners ever have been able to claim, which is that you ran the most difficult running event of its kind anywhere and successfully completed it. So congrats, Lily.
Congrats,
and good luck
Lily.
with your upcoming cross-country season this next year. And Lily's dad as well. And I think your
Joe.
name is Joe. So thanks for saying hello. And Lily also saw the video because Joe has run the race before and Lily wanted to do it. And so he had her watch the video to get an idea for what to expect. That was a good idea.
So
Nicely
maybe
done.
you'll do more of these, Zach, now that you've heard that they're
maybe,
helpful?
but the point is you can also watch that video. We'll put a link to it at AtoZrunning.com. You can also, if you follow us on YouTube, we've got a playlist of all of the running events that we've recorded videos. So just jump on YouTube, AtoZrunning, and you can find these cool things.
Awesome. Well, let's get on to the main topic. This week we have form on the mind because we recently got together with some of our runners to do some form evaluation. So we thought this might be a great topic because we've gotten a lot of questions about it. And running form, what it tells us, what it doesn't tell us, how we can identify some things that maybe we want to investigate to help us become better runners.
Indeed. And so in talking more about that here, we should also just simply mention it's one of the perks of our coaching services that we also offer running form analysis and recommendations. And it doesn't matter where you are and where you live because you can send us video footage. But you got to first be one of the A to Z Runner athletes.
I have to say, I think some of the best running evaluations you can get, though, are at your PT office if your PT does this sort of thing.
If they have gait
Because
analysis set up, yes.
Yeah. So no matter who your coach is, where you live, I think that that's probably a really good idea, a great investment for you to go and get that done at a PT office where they have the whole setup. So yes.
So Andy likes to hedge, but we're better, of course.
No, we're not. We're not. PTs are going to be able to give
No,
you like more recommendations when it comes
well, they
to
also
like,
have like more camera angles and
Yeah.
more precise instrumentation.
right.
than
But it is
the
a real
footage you send us from your phone.
yeah.
It's true.
But what we're going to talk about today is maybe even some things that you can identify for yourself if you record yourself and then you're able to review that. So we're going to give you some idea of what to look for and what conclusions that you shouldn't draw from what you see.
That's good. Yeah. Well done. Because it's the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. Both are important here. One of the things that I will suggest, and kind of like a big picture, broad reflection, most runners can improve what they're doing by doing nothing else except for watching really good running form mechanics, someone who's like doing it super well, like even just watching Olympic races of someone who like is doing it really well, and then just trying to emulate that can improve what you're doing.
There you are, plugging the world of running.
Well, it just so happens. But no, the
love
point
it,
is,
yeah.
the reason is because for me, when this all began, my efforts to improve the way I was running started when I first started running seriously in high school. And I had a teammate who was a year older than me, and he just like looked like the perfect runner to me at the time, right? And everything was just really efficient. And it happens to be true as well now that I know even better than I did it as a high schooler, looking up to the team captain kind of thing, right? But I would just kind of try to run like him. And I didn't do a great job of it, but it helped things a bit. And then a few years later in college, same scenario, the team captain, senior guy who is super cool. And I would run with him, the team we run together. And I would just say, okay, I'm going to just try to look more like him when I'm running. Now, that got me a little bit of improvement, but it only goes so far, and that's part of what we're going to try to deconstruct a bit here, which is what does it actually do when I'm trying to address my running form and how best to accomplish that? What do I know and learn from seeing things in my running?
And it might not look exactly the same for each runner, and that's why there's a huge discussion as to whether or not you should actually try to fix your form or not. But there are some things in physics that allow for you to run better if you are able to improve them. So
Trying to apply science to this art of running. Andy.
yeah. I mean, if you're thinking about propulsion and you're like your push off, like how can you best start gaining momentum? How are you best able to use your stride with the energy that you're using to move yourself forward? I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, but it's not going to look exactly the same from person to person because we're different sizes and we have different cadence. We talked about like that there isn't really a perfect cadence, even though there has been a lot of talk about 180 being perfect. Well, it's going to be different depending on the person. So there's optimal that's going to look different for different runners. But we're going to argue that there are things that you can do to help yourself use your energy to push yourself off the ground in a more efficient way.
Yeah, you're. That's our first main point. But let me just say, to illustrate the point that it is different for different people, even in the grand scope of certain things are better. For example, the super shoes, right? In lab tests, one of the things that's important to remember in lab tests with elite athletes. So let's exclude then the variation in potential talent or capacity, right? And just take a bunch of athletes who are a similar level of elite status. Even then, they say Nike's shoes got like a 4% efficiency improvement, right? Running economy return, return. Even then, within lab testing, it's actually like 2 to 7%. And so you've got elite athletes who see almost no benefit and some who see substantial benefit in contrast. By the way, fascinatingly, I'm one of those who's like a 7%-ish benefit, which I don't understand exactly why. But in the lab testing, the guy who was like, wow, this is really interesting.
I have a theory on that.
You do? Because I'm highly inefficient when I'm running without them? Is that why?
No, you're not highly inefficient, but I think that it puts you in a better position for your push-off because you do tend to heel strike.
Oh, yeah. I heel strike
So I think that
that's
why you're getting a better energy return is because these shoes do help you hit the ground better, like in a more proper place. That's my theory. That's why you get such a big
well, that's not actually just a theory. That's in
benefit.
fact what researcher Kyle even observed.
Said to you?
Yes.
Oh.
Because he was the one
like
sitting
being
there
right.
watching me while I was on the treadmill with the different shoe types. Anyway, so I had the chance to lab test those shoes and got a firsthand experience on this idea that not all things affect all things equally for all people. And that's one piece of it. But let's back up slightly and just simply underscore the point Andy was making. There are basically two schools of thought with running form and mechanics. And the one is don't mess with your form. Do what feels natural, and that will be what's best for you. So that's the naturalist approach to running form. And then the other side of it is by improving your mechanics, you can be more efficient, more economical. And that's Andy's comment about like the laws of physics and how motion works, and the laws of pendulums and how they function, like all that kind of stuff. You can improve something that is less than efficient by improving its motion mechanics.
Let's bring another law into this, and I might be using this improperly. Sorry, science people, but like the law of entropy, that things left to their natural state are going to break down. So, for instance, I'm thinking of running like during the day. You have gravity, and you also are. Many of us are hunching our shoulders over a computer. If left to our natural, not doing any kind of mobility for our back beforehand or doing any kind of warm-ups that would remind our bodies how to properly run, I would argue that entropy, that our body's posture during the day would definitely be detrimental to our ability to run. And so saying like don't do anything to try to change it or activate or, help ourselves realign, I think, do you see he's giving me the worst eyebrows right now?
I'm so
I don't know
interested in where she's taking this entropy thing. Well, I get what you're saying. Yeah. I just simply would say that I don't believe the naturalists feel that their argument is appropriately represented in that sense because they don't think just don't touch it and don't do anything about it. It's more try to run well, try to do things well, and whatever happens as a result of that attempt is the best thing for you to do. That's more the idea. However, That's all simply to say, I more agree than, though, with Andy, with your point, that when we leave our motion to just the natural movement, we assume two premises. One, that your current movement is your natural movement. So whatever I'm doing right now is my natural movement. Well, of course, that may not be true. If I'm fatiguing, if I'm stressed, if I'm, all the things that influence the way my body actually moves, which is lots of things. So my current movement might not actually be my most natural movement, which is important to think about. And then the other premise is your current natural movement is the best movement for you, which we simply disagree with that point altogether. The best movement for you is not just whatever happens naturally. There are lots of things that we do, and why we develop them is an important question, because that's a key piece in all of this. Why is it that I'm moving in a certain way that happens to be feeling natural and yet is bad? Whatever that why is, we'll address that separately. The what as a result of that is rarely ever the best possible thing. So I say this in terms of, I think every runner benefits from some work addressing running form, even the upper tier. Well, not every runner, because it's clear that, what's his name? We were just watching the U.S. Championships. Anyway, the U.S. 5,000 meter winner,
Abdi Noor.
Thank you, Abdi Noor. He needs to do nothing to address his running.
He's like
perfect.
Fanning over this guy.
Fanning? No. I'm just simply saying a fact.
Admiring.
No, I'm just addressing a fact. The man is the epitome of good running when he moves.
Okay.
So anyway, much like how people used to say about Mo Farah at the time, because it's also true there.
How about Eliud Kipchoge?
No, not in the same way. I mean, Kipchoge is great. He's very, very efficient.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like, it's not the same. But anyway, so let's get to then. So those premises are not true in our opinion.
Can I add one thing?
Not completely, at least. Yes.
Okay, so a caveat to what we're saying also is that the contriving of a perfect form is also not always beneficial as well. So
to believe that there is a perfect form and everyone should look just like that. Is that what you mean?
Or like you trying to emulate someone that's fast to a T without understanding the cues to look for, or like the things to look for in your own form. So like just trying to emulate what you think is perfect form and trying to do that with a lot of energy while you're running is likely not going to yield the result you're looking for, and you probably will be more tense, and you probably will be more sore, and then you probably won't be as fast or efficient because of those things. So
well, yeah, we would argue that long term, that approach, just trying to do it while I'm running, is in fact the worst approach to fixing it, and by itself in isolation, for those reasons, among others.
So that was the caveat I had.
But here's an even more precise way to think about that. You can look like your movement can look all the right ways and still be wrong. And the example is our PT, Adam, at Endurance Rehabilitation and Athletics in Ada, Michigan. So Adam will say oftentimes, he's like, yeah, it looks like everything's working well, but then when we start going through like some testing of things, your kinetic chain is firing in the wrong order. So the motion happens correctly. Eventually it gets there, but the firing is not correct. And as a result, I'm ending up with a strain in my hamstring that I can't seem to get rid of because we've got a wiring problem. So it comes down to, if there's an issue, there's some ways to notice and observe that. And then how we address that is probably the most important thing we're going to say all this time. So let's get to that.
Yeah.
I would argue there's probably more than that, but there's three main things that your running form tells you about. The first is it tells you about your strengths and weaknesses / mobility, tightness, and looseness. And so by the way we run and what's happening while we're running, we can learn things about strength and mobility. All right. The second one is structural discrepancies. You can learn by seeing someone run about potential asymmetries that you have in your structure, not just, this muscle's tight or loose, but like this leg is shorter or longer than the other one, things like that. And then the final one is the movement inefficiencies. You can see someone move and think the nature of what's happening there is costing that person more energy. So those are the main areas. What we want to try to do here is give you some examples of each one and then address what it looks like to try to improve that area specifically, how that affects my running form, and or how to improve my running form within that area. Does that make sense, Andy? Is it where we're trying to go
That last
here?
sentence was a little confusing
No,
and
it
muddy, but
wasn't.
before that I was tracking with you.
Okay. Well, let's do each one and then that'll make more sense.
All right.
So strength and mobility. We can learn about these things from what we see in our running. Often this is the easiest thing to notice in certain kinds of ways. And so some examples, when a muscle area group is weak, it can't sustain load or the proper motion the way it should. And you get all sorts of things like movement that shouldn't be there, or a lack of movement that should be there, or asymmetries and things. And so examples include, like with young runners, you always see this with young runners, especially young female runners, as it were. And I don't know if there's a reason specifically why, but knees going inward, collapsing knees. And then oftentimes you see the collapsing knee the best when their foot comes up backwards and it comes up to the outside slightly. And so you get this kind of like this fanning motion. That is almost always indicative of weak knees and or hips. Usually
And
it's the
adductors.
hips, but well, yeah, that's part of the hip complex I'm referring to. But so right away you see someone running and you can see that very clearly, and you think that that runner has some weakness. Probably. That's not the only thing that might mean, but it's very likely because it is so common, and that's one of the signs. Mm-hmm. Now, one for some of us who are not young runners anymore, but maybe a more experienced runner who's been doing this thing for a long time, dipping in the hips and shoulders. Like so your hips and your shoulders should really stay mostly parallel to the ground the whole time you're running, with just a little bit of dip, but it's barely discernible to the naked eye. But if you see clearly someone's got some like, I'm doing this motion right now if you can't see it because you're listening, which most
You're
of
not
you
missing
listen.
out.
You're not missing out. This is not something you need to see. But anyway, you get a little bit of like, it's almost kind of like a sway to the cadence, to the running cadence. That usually is indicative of some weakness, oftentimes, again, in the hips.
Or lack of firing. Yeah.
Or that too.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of oars. We'll come back to that.
Can I say what it's supposed to look like?
Yes, that's
Should I bring back
why
Abdi
you're here.
Noor?
You can bring back Abdi or just in general.
You see these runners, especially in track, you can see it really well because usually the coverage is better.
Yeah, they've
You
got a
actually
camera
see
on them like the
and
whole
it's not
time,
bouncing
right
on the
in their
back of a
face.
motorcycle.
Yeah.
So you're able to see it a lot better. But their carriage, if you're just looking at their upper body, and it's like completely still, like at their hips,
Like no up and down
and
movement.
it's like they're
at
moving underwater. It's not really underwater, but if you imagine like a duck moving underwater, that's like, but they're just floating. They're just floating along the water. But there's all this action that's coming underneath it. But their hips stay still, and it's really evident to see in high level performers. And if you do watch things like the U.S. Championships or the World Championships coming up that we report on, make sure you notice that because it is really prevalent.
It's so good to watch. So good. So that's a good example. Stillness and structural stability in your running mechanic is a very good thing. We want to see more of that. Not that we can all get there perfectly, but so that's one. I didn't put this in the notes specifically, but we ought to like say what are some of the key signs, the key things we want to try to have. Stillness in especially in our up and down and our side to side. I'm using very poor terminology here, but anatomical terminology. The up and down and the side to side should be minimal movement at best. When we're at higher levels of effort, when we're at really low levels of effort, it's kind of impossible to reduce the up and down motion entirely, but everything else should be still minimal. Okay. So that's a good one. That's a good one. All right, we'll come back to that. So as far as mobility then, some other quick examples here. Too tight or hypermobile, usually it's a tightness problem. your muscles aren't relaxing and contracting properly. And so you're going to get all sorts of visible range of motion indicators, like how far back your heel comes, or how far up, I guess is a better way to say it. How far up your heel comes when you're running, where your hip rotation is or is not. And I'm not talking about the side to side and up and down, but the actual rotation of your hip as it's moving, all of those kinds of things. And then also where your foot and ankle flexion is when you're impacting the ground. So if you were to like slow down, super slow-mo, and see someone hits the ground and where the flexion happens, and then when they come off the ground where the flexion happens, you should see good amounts of movement there, mobility in those joints. And when you don't, it tends to be fairly obvious.
Also, hip flexion. You might not see it if you're going more slowly, but when you're at like a steady effort, you want to be able to see some of that hip flexion. If people are not able to raise their leg up, there's probably something going on, either in weakness or in mobility there as well.
Yeah. So you'll see some asymmetry potentially there, because the point with things like tightness, strength, and weakness is it's very rarely even. And so usually you get like a little bit more or less of something on one side. A good example is one of our runners recently was sharing a video with us, video footage of himself running, and one of his feet was rotated slightly as he was coming from the back into the foot strike. As he was moving from, his foot was already up and it was coming down toward foot strike, it was rotated slightly outward. And then right at foot strike, it would rotate back inward. Well, clearly he it just so happens that his sports chiro diagnosed the thing he and I were talking about shortly after we were talking about it. He's got a tightness problem in his upper hip complex that's pulling his leg outward, pulling his foot outward. So that was an indicator. As soon as he sent me that and we looked at it, we're like, okay, clearly there is something here that needs to be addressed. And well, let's extend the example here, because the question that he was asking me is, he had been advised by someone at one point recently to try to, while he was running, to try to bring his foot closer to center line when he was striking the ground. And as he's explaining this to me, I'm like, what? How are you supposed to cognitively, like consciously, make your foot land closer to the center line as you're running? That is such a difficult thing for anyone to control that it was fascinating to me that was the recommendation. Now, granted, it was a good recommendation in terms of that would help address the motion problem. But the better question was, why was that bad motion happening? And that's what his follow-up, as he had more appointments to look at it, the follow-up appointment was, you've got some tightness here. We need to loosen that up, and then it will work itself out.
This is just a general, this is not talking to the specific case because I don't know about it, but this is a word of caution because I have been one to try to fix things within a run before, and it does at times, the cues are good. So like, let's say that you have developed some wiring that is good. So before you run, you do some drills, or you've worked on some things that you want to remind yourself of to continue the good motion patterns. That's good. But let's say there's something that is prohibiting good form, like a tightness issue. We are so good at compensating. So if we make it happen,
bad might be a better term, that we're so bad about compensating.
It is quite amazing and remarkable what we can do and to compensate, and it can be detrimental, even though in the short term it can help us get through a lot of things. It can help us get through races or runs. But this is my caution. When we do that and it feels bad, so if we are trying to correct something and it doesn't feel right, and then later we're feeling very sore, that is not going to help move us forward in our recovery, especially if this is induced by something that's injury related or something that we haven't been able to create proper strength for before changing our form. So that's my word of caution, is that if it feels badly to do it, that it's not during the run that's the time to be working on it.
Yeah, there's other reasons why as well. We'll get to our baseline recommendations here shortly, and elaborate further on that point, because that's a good one. I think the only other thing I'll mention about the tightness is one of the most common ones that people don't see themselves, but someone else can see when they're watching you, is when you're trying to run at a higher effort, hamstring tightness and or weakness, glute weakness specifically, manifests as poor heel lift. Your back mechanics, which is the term for those running mechanics that happen behind the center line contact with the ground, those back mechanics, if they're very low and they're very short, that is almost always indicative of hamstring tightness or glute weakness. So someone can diagnose that for you.
Dominance that can turn into those things,
well,
because you're running.
It's a chicken and egg. It's
Which
hard to
comes
know.
first, right?
Your quads might be dominant because they're trying to make up for all of those steps you're running. They're making up for bad hamstrings and or glutes. Then your quads are going to become more and more dominant. Yep. So that's one side of it, the strength and mobility side of it. The structural discrepancies is one that we'll spend the least amount of time on here, because this is not something that you need someone to diagnose this and then come up with solutions for you. You don't ever generally want to self-diagnose what to do about structural discrepancies. Now we're talking about like leg length discrepancy, foot size discrepancy, some of those types of things, but also things like spine angle and or some of the other positional things with your actual like skeleton and some of that. So when you have those types of things, they always manifest in some form of running mechanic. And they're almost always something that you have to be very careful about trying to repair. Because, for instance, like leg length discrepancy, you can do things like a shoe lift, which can be highly effective. But if you do that and you don't have a leg length discrepancy, you just think you do, but in reality, you've got a tilt in your hip because there's some crazy tightness that needs to be loosened up. Once that's loosened up and your hip SI joint is adjusted and suddenly your legs are normal length again as each other, you do not want to be wearing a heel lift in that scenario, because it's going to worsen the problem of that SI joint tilt or something. Mm-hmm. So don't try to self-diagnose this kind of stuff, but understand that a structural discrepancy can manifest very clearly in our running mechanic. And that's one of the reasons, as Andy was saying earlier, having someone, a professional with a gait analysis, being able to look at that and say, wow, we see this. Let's look at some possible structural things, because if it is those things, it's something like in the situations we've talked with, like leg length discrepancies with runners, putting the lift in the shoe, and it's like instant relief from pains or tightness or soreness. And it's instant like running mechanic efficiency improvement, because all it needed was my legs to not hit the ground in awkward angles. So it's something to remember. It's something that is worth exploring if you're having problems, especially chronic problems. Okay. Is anything else that we should say about that? I don't think so.
No.
Okay. All right. So the last one, which is also our favorite one, is movement inefficiencies, motion problems. And this is the piece of the puzzle that is the biggest rationale for actually trying to improve our running form and mechanics. Those other two are more like issues that any runner wants to address. You know, if you got a tight muscle or a weakness, you want to improve that, whether or not it's affecting your running form. It just happens to also be visible in your running form. But this last one, this is where we can achieve substantial gains by addressing how we move. And this is what Andy was suggesting earlier when she was talking about the wiring side of it and some of those cues you can have while you're running. We'll come back to that. But first, let's kind of look at how we break down this concept. First of all is the idea that a motion that is poorly wired is ineffective and or inefficient. And so the person who says, let yourself just do what feels natural, but if the thing is an inefficient motion or an ineffective motion, and I could rewire that to move better, then I'm going to see improvements. It's going to help me whether stay healthier. It's going to help me to run better, whether that's longer, faster, otherwise, both. But it's worthwhile in our opinion. So that's where we get into things like, okay, what do you mean when you say running movement or motion mechanics? So we're talking about like your foot strike position. Where does your foot strike the ground relative to your hips? What part of your foot strikes the ground, and how does it move when it's striking the ground? Arm carriage, which is always an interesting one. I think even more than anything else, arm carriage is one that people are like, just don't mess with it. Just let it do what it's going to do. But that's not really that's not really great.
And the reason, though, I think is because there are a lot of top level runners that have crazy arm carriages.
Yes.
I think that's probably why they say that.
Yeah, and it's very possible, and it's very true. But so the example I'll always go back to is Jay DeSherry is one of the prime sources for all of our specific and precise recommendations here. Outside of Andy's experiences with Coach Hodge, the king of running form and mechanics, Jay DeSherry's work has been very influential. And one of the exercises he has is an arm carriage exercise where he says basically stand right in front of a wall, like your toes are almost in contact with the wall, put your arms at about a 90-degree angle, and then just move them as if you're running. And it's not super fast, but it's not like slow. And your fists should basically just about come in contact with the wall, right? Where your toes are touching the wall. And that's about where you want your arms to be when you're running. Now, why would that be? Because it's the least energy cost for your arms to move. Now, does that mean when I go out and run that my arms are going to do exactly that same amount of movement for the entire time? No. But in Jay DeSherry's example specifically here, by doing that exercise regularly over a small window of time, like for 2 to 4 weeks, a frequent exercise like 2 days, 2 times a day or something like that, what it's going to do is it's going to rewire the autonomic function in my brain to suggest that my arms should move more like that when I'm running. And then when I get out there and I'm actually running, my arm carriage is going to be in a better kind of state than it was previously as a result of that work.
I'm going to step out on a limb here, and I'm going to guess that there's probably more upper thoracic tightness these days with all of our work that we do at computers.
Well, it's really more the
punching
phones.
over our phones.
Yeah, it's the phones.
Than ever before. And those things don't just solve themselves. There has to be some energy put in. Like I talked about before with entropy, you have to put energy back in to restore. So I do a lot of times when I'm watching people run, or I'm seeing athletes, or I'm seeing myself because I see it in myself too. There is such tightness in the upper thoracic region that is evident in just like this really tight and I'd say rigid upper body. Do you notice that too? Or
yes. Well, and DeSherry noticed it so much so that one of the first things he recommends people do as they're moving down the process of trying to address running form and mechanics is that basketball release thing. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Just lay on a basketball, find a spot that doesn't feel good, and then just lay on it and breathe deeply.
You can also do that on a foam roller. You can also do
that
on other types of balls. There's those circular devices that they have, like it's a yoga thing, I think, that you can there's a few things that you could use for that, but it is really helpful in helping not only help you feel better day to day, but then also improve your form and your mechanics and everything you're doing, actually, because we go about life and we're doing all kinds of things. And so this can help us just restore and help us throughout the day.
Yeah. But remember here, and this, so we're kind of saying this in a scattered way, but if I might go back to the beginning, the goal of trying to improve, whether it's while I'm running or as Andy's trying to make like a more global statement here, it's true. The goal of trying to improve these things is to turn it into an autonomic function so that it's happening by itself. I'm not thinking about it, but the best movement, the more correct movement is the natural one for me. So if that's the goal, what we have to figure out is what can I do to eventually have that be the case when it isn't currently. And that's where Jay DeSherry's, the book is called Running Rewired because he's talking about rewiring the motion, the function autonomically. So that the actual nervous system has to be performing its job without me consciously thinking about it. So if this is where the principle of, well, if it's something that's tight or weak, rewiring it is great, but if it's still tight and weak, it's still not going to move properly. And the rewiring work may be less effective ultimately as well. And so that's why I do need to address the mobility and strength issues. I need to address those things probably foremost first so that when I move, I can move effectively in the best way. Not just that I'm doing the movement, but I'm actually doing it fluidly, correctly, smoothly, some of those things. But as it goes, if that's the goal, that autonomic function, what are the things we can do about it? And so just to go back to what we were saying, arm carriage being a piece of that, torso, your tilt and position. So that's like, am I leaning forward? Am I leaning backwards? Am I hunching? Am I, what's that called? Bowed, arched. Is my back arched? So all of those things, there's kind of like a happy medium, right? In the middle of all of that. My knee drive, Andy was mentioning earlier, the quad heavy type of running mechanic, or my heel lift. And so the front mechanics, back mechanics, all of those things, among others, are these pieces in the puzzle. And there are certain things we can do to improve any specific piece of the puzzle. But these things need to be precise, highly precise, to be as effective as possible. So one thing to notice, to just mention, an underscore here, if we can rule out the strength and mobility stuff first, if we can rule out structural asymmetry, then what's left is I clearly don't have a properly wired running mechanic, and that is now fallow ground. I guess it's fertile ground for...
Those are opposites.
No.
Fallow and fertile?
No. Fallow is like it's ready to be planted. Fertile is like it's able to grow.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean, my agricultural references that are probably incorrect. Okay, so here's then this is the point of all of this. What can we do? So that's the first example was the arm one that we gave. You find an exercise or some kind of drill that gets to it breaks down the motion as much as is reasonable. You can break a motion down too much, and then it's no longer practical. But break down the motion as much as is practical to get to the point where you're isolating the correct motion, and then you're repeating it over and over and over, insofar as you're not overly fatiguing yourself to do so. And then you're doing that regularly in a small period of time, 2 to 4 weeks minimum, regularly, like every day, if not more than once a day.
We actually have something for you that can help with this.
It just so happens.
Yeah, if you go to AtoZrunning.com/free, you can get our free pre-run routine that we've created for you. So it has everything in it that we recommend before running. I mean, that there's things that our PT have given us. We also include those too, or different areas that are tight and stuff. But this is what we recommend to every runner to do.
So, well, by the way, you need to give us your email. So that's why you need to go to that website, and then we'll email it to you. That's how we're going to deliver it to you.
With the PDF.
It's a video that walks through the whole routine, so you can do it with us and with explanation. And as Andy said, a PDF if you like, print it out and have a really cool, beautiful looking, flashy, because Andy made it and it's wonderful. So yes, 2 formats for you to ingest and digest this pre-run routine. But the point is, the connection here is key. So we say, okay, you've got to do these precise movements. You've got to break it down to its most simple, practical, and so you can turn it into an autonomic function. Well, how do you do that? It's a routine like this. Here's what it does. In this pre-run routine specifically, we start with Dr. Gary Gray's lunge matrix, which is helping to mobilize a bit and activate all the different planes of motion, forward, back, transverse, side to side, things like that. And that's kind of more like hip, knee, ankle type of stuff, but it's also strengthening. So remember we mentioned, like, if you have a strength discrepancy, that's a problem. And autonomic function notwithstanding, you need to address the strengthening. Well, the lunge matrix basically addresses all of the kind of functional movement strengthening that happen while you're running. And so it's a minimal thing. You're only doing 5 lunges with each leg for each motion. So it's not major, but it's going to help.
And it works in all the planes of motion as well.
As mentioned.
We talked about lots of wasted energy. This helps you with that.
Yeah, so that's the first piece. Then we do the leg swings. Who knows where those originally came from, but whoever came up with the leg swings.
A long time.
Yeah, the side to side, the front to back. So do the leg swings. It opens up your hip socket a little bit more, and that's great. And then the precision drills. Now, let me pause for a moment, because even for the lunges and the leg swings, and then even more so for the precision drills, the deliberate and intentional way you do it is essential. And so like leg swings, for example, if I stand there with my hands against a fence trying to do my leg swings and I'm just all floppy and flippy and I'm just like wiggly and wobbly while I'm doing it, that's bad. That's not helping me. As a matter of fact, it's probably hurting me. And that's just the leg swings. It's even worse if I'm doing that with the precision exercises. I need to be very deliberate, very stable, and coordinated while I'm doing these things. Okay, keep that in mind because we're going to come back to it. So then the precision routine itself, developed by Coach Hodgkinson. We did not make this up ourselves. We go to the pros for these things, and Hodge is the king. So the precision drills take all of the key motions of a running mechanic and break them down to a very simple, very isolated movement. And then you do it repeatedly over and over, which is what repeatedly means, for a decent amount of time. And then you do that every day. As I mentioned just a moment ago, for 2 to 4 weeks minimum before you start seeing the results. We suggest you should do this every day for the rest of your life.
That's what Zach does.
Yes.
Every day.
Everyone should. But you might not have time.
I don't do it every day, but I do start to do that before during conditioning, before sharpening.
Yes, but you should also do it every day.
I should,
because well, why?
There's a lot of
I guess
things.
Yeah, there is. But why do we say you should be doing this every time? Because the point again is to improve my running mechanic. I need these correct, precise movements to be autonomic. They should happen without me having to think about them. Well, the only way you turn a motion into an autonomic motion is by doing it often enough, consistently doing it often enough that your body can then do it without you having to think about it. So we do this every day. We do this on repeat every time. And we make sure when we're doing it that we're doing it correctly as best as we possibly can. And this is where we say with something like this kind of stuff, doing this with a second set of eyes, a friend, doing this in front of a mirror, or like recording yourself and then going back and watching it. Real time is better even than recording it. So if someone's standing there and telling you, hey, this is what's happening, change it. Or you have a mirror so you can see it. It's true. I do lunges and leg swings and precision drills in front of mirrors as often as I can. When you're like at a hotel and you've got the workout room.
Good.
Oh my goodness. I did not say that, and I would never say that. But you can see, I need to change. My knee is not actually driving forward on this knee drive forward thing. So let me give you some examples here. In this precision routine, here's what you're doing. You're doing something like, okay, we talked about your foot strike should be right underneath your hips, essentially, or very nearly right underneath your hips. So there's an exercise where you're lifting your foot up and putting it straight back down. And you're doing that, both feet, but you're doing that over and over, very short steps, very quick steps. And all you're doing is you're teaching your body to be comfortable with your foot hitting the ground right underneath you. That's it.
And popping off it quickly.
And coming off the ground quickly, which I guess you're doing two things at once there, but that motion should become natural. And so when I'm running, we'll do that more likely. So I do that one exercise like that. Now, how about something like the skips? There's skips where you're focusing on drive, or you're focusing on the pull through. There's two different skips essentially that we do. Well, if I break down that drive into a single motion, that skip off the ground, bunk, bunk, and I'm bouncing off the ground, then I'm creating this very coordinated, stable driving motion on repeat over and over.
Which also, in turn, activates the proper muscles in firing. So that's also a major advantage of precision drills is activation.
Right. And that's kind of the spirit of the pre-run routine for someone who's like, you could say, is perfect. Why should they still do that? Well, because it's warming them up. It's activating things in the proper kinetic chain to be effective then when they run. So it's like turning on all the electronics, right? So that's good. But for most of us, we're not perfect. It's also helping us get better at that.
Zach had said something about doing things lazily or whatever. So if you are feeling tired or you are tight on time, just do fewer of them, but do them properly.
Yeah, even to the point, this may be something where it's like you cut some of them out initially and just focus on a few for now. Once you have those more fully developed, then add in some more. And the example that I always give is the skip ones. If you go and follow the routine, as the routine progresses, the movements get more complex. It's true that they're not all very simple and isolated. And so as they get more complex, if I don't do them well, it's even harder to do them well, right? And so there are ways we could break those down further. For example, the skips, any of the skips. Many people, adults, kids alike, have a hard time skipping in a coordinated, deliberate fashion. I was among them. It took me a long time to figure out how to do the skips in a pre-run routine. And so if you have a hard time with that, well, what is a skip? It's essentially a marching motion with a bounce, with a hop off the ground. So take away the bounce part, the hop part, and just have the march part where you're just moving the leg, the driving leg up and then back down, and you don't actually come off the ground with your other foot. That's a great place to start because you can turn in that motion into a skip more easily once that becomes a natural, comfortable thing. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of, but the point is, if I can't do these things correctly, I'm harming myself to do them incorrectly because I'm incorrectly wiring my movement if I'm doing them in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And so I have to do that extra work of isolating the motion and doing it well. And I probably need additional help with that if we just can't, none of us can see ourselves while we're doing these things, not fully, not clearly. So that's why a second set of eyes, that's why a mirror, those types of things are really good practice, especially early on. Mm-hmm.
I did say something like, if you don't have a lot of time, I should put you all at ease telling you that it's only about 7 minutes.
It's
all of it.
Once you're familiar
drills,
with it.
Entire thing. That's the lunge matrix, the leg swings, and the precision drills. All of that together, once you're familiar, is about 7 minutes. So it's not a huge time commitment. I know a lot of us start freaking out thinking, okay, another thing that I should be doing, and it can cause some anxiety. But to know that it's not a very long time commitment, and like Zach said, start with a couple of the drills and then add more as you get more and more comfortable. That can also help you digest it and figure it out and maybe give you some peace of mind as you're thinking of adding something to your routine.
Yeah. So that's good. AtoZrunning.com/free is how you gain access to that. Many of you have already done that. We know this. You have given us your email. We've sent it to you. And so if that's the case, and you, as often happens with emails, if you've lost or misplaced or simply somehow never found that email that we claim we sent you, you're always welcome to
reach out.
Put your name in it again.
Oh, yeah, you can do that.
Reach out, things like that. But what it amounts to is this. In summary, if I want to improve my running form, the first thing I do is I think about strength, mobility, and or structural discrepancies. If I have issues in those areas, I should be trying to address them foremost because that inhibits good motion even if I have great wiring. So that's a place to start. Now, in general, beyond that, and at all times, I should be doing the work to teach my body how to move properly outside of running. Because it's almost impossible to do this while I'm running if I'm doing it wrong to fix that. So that, we'll get there. So I need to do the work outside of running, and that's where the precision, coordination, stability drills are going to come into play. And then, as I am, and I'll let you say it, Andy, as I have established some of those good motion patterns, and they're happening automatically,
then there are tools in your toolbox to use during your racing or running. We had talked about in our episode about toughness with Steve Magnus and like some ways of pushing through difficult things. Well, one of them is honing down on something small. And so you go back to your precision drills. Okay, I'm going to think about lifting my foot off the ground as fast as I can and landing underneath me. So using those as cues. So now that you have them as cues, it can help you not only with your form, but also with your focus as you are training and racing. And that is something that a detail that you can focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. So what it amounts to there is the complete package. You're able to correct yourself as you go. But you have to build that up, that capacity up first. That's good. Mm-hmm. Well, that about summarizes it. I think we've solved all your running form problems now. But as noted, give us your email in that AtoZrunning.com/free thing so we can send you the pre-run routine if you'd like. But also, this is the kind of thing that is hard to do by yourself. So find the buddy, reach out to somebody. You can reach out to us.
Videotape yourself.
If you'd like to. Video yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All good tools. Now on to the world of running.
Well, let's always begin World of Running with some A to Z runners and some shout outs here. Dano and Hannah, congrats on the RTS 10K, the brutal one aforementioned. And not only that, Dano first in age group, Hannah third in age group.
Woo woo.
Well done. Also, a bunch of our folks ran in a...
Zach won that race, by the way.
I ran in it as well. A bunch of our people ran in a mile on a track, which is just a load of fun.
So much fun.
Not a thing that's very easy to find opportunities for adult runners. But we have one of those in our area, and a number of the people who we work with in our area were able to run it. So congrats to Ben, who, by the way, also ran a PR
Good
in
job,
the mile.
Ben. Woo woo.
Craig, Marissa, Hannah, nice work. Stephanie, who also ran a PR. Jacob, PR, and CJ, all personal best performances in the mile. That's impressive. And Jared, nice run as well.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
Zach ran it too. Not a PR.
Not a PR, and I did not win.
But it was fun.
Seems to
He
be
had,
the thing that
you
you're
know, I
trying to
asked
say
him, I'm
right
like,
now.
what do you, he said that the race was fun. Like, he didn't get the time he wanted. He didn't get the place he wanted, but it was the kind of race.
I want
having to sprint for the finish.
Fight. I like to fight.
Yeah. Go,
And so
like, get
I
after
want
it.
the, like, especially, so this is how it goes with everyone, right? You want to fight in a moment when you feel strong, like you feel capable of fighting well. That's not true of every single person. Not all of us are quite as aggressive as Zach. But for the most part, when it comes down to the idea of competition, it's this sense of like when I feel strong and powerful, I want to fight with someone else who's strong and powerful and see who comes out on top. And so that personally, that's the way I like to race. I like to fight and have a good fight. And I don't really care if I win or not, as long as it was a good fight.
It was a fun race.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's zoom all the way out to the world now, globally, in the continuation of the Diamond League. So there's a little bit of a break. I don't know that it specifically is for the U.S. Championships, that they have that weekend off for the Diamond League. People say that, but I'm not inclined to think. It's not just. There's also European Championships, British Championships happening at the same time. Kenyan Championships were all at the same time. So there's a reason why they shouldn't be doing Diamond League.
And they did two the weekend before. So
Well, yeah.
and most of the
Make up for
U.S.
lost
athletes did not go to it because it was within a week of the U.S. Championships. So
yeah, well, two of them. Yeah. So they continue the circuit in Poland, this time in Silesia and Silesia. So this one now featured a few different events, some good stuff here. The women's 3,000, which is always a fun race, very aggressive, very fast. And in particular, they set the pacing pretty aggressive. Now, what's interesting is pretty early on, it was apparent that no one actually was going to go with the rabbits, and you always wonder why. But
this is in the women's 3,000.
Women's 3,000. Yep, I said that, didn't I?
I don't know.
I did, but it ended up being still an impressive performance. Race was won in a meeting record time. So what it ends up coming down to is like three of them or so are duking it out over the last couple laps, and it's Furweni Hailu of Ethiopia, Lillian Rangaruk of Kenya, and Lemlem Hailu of Ethiopia. And Furweni Hailu lately, and we've mentioned her a couple times, she has a finishing final lap.
She does.
That is, I mean, we're talking about like Faith Kipyegon level speed.
Like 58.
Yes, in the
Not
last
in this
400
race,
meters.
but she
So-
has done that in other races.
Yeah, so she's dangerous. I don't know exactly what she's going to run in the World Championships because she's been running a lot of different distances, but even Faith Kipyegon should be wary of her, and that's saying something. So Hailu won the race for when he won the race, blazing final lap. Lillian Rangaruk, by the way, also has a great finish and was with her until like the last 50 meters.
Yeah.
Almost held on.
Yeah.
Just something.
Was she young? Was she a young one?
Rangaruk?
Yeah.
No, she's
No?
not one of the
Okay.
really young ones. No.
So there is, just to kind of tell you, because you're going to see both of them at the main stage, but there is two Hailus. There's the Ethiopian Hailu, and
They're
then there
both
is
Ethiopian.
I thought you said Kenyan.
No, Kenyan is Rangaruk.
Okay.
But Lemlem and Furweni Hailu are both Ethiopian.
Okay.
I don't believe they're related to each other. It's not one of those where it's like they are sisters or something, but yeah. They get confused often because people will just say Hailu, and they're both running similar events regularly.
And they're both top tier.
Both world-class running. Yeah, well, they finished first and third in this race.
Right.
So that happened, but then a little bit further back in the event, a Latvian national record for Agate Kaune in 8:39, and a South American and Venezuelan record for Jocelyn Brea. And by the way, Brea also holds the I was looking her up because I was like, I want to figure out a little bit more about, because this was an interesting, she's come up a few times. Well, she holds the Venezuelan records in the 1500, the 3000 now,
Steeple.
the 3000 steeple, and the 5000, and would hold the Venezuelan record in the 10,000, except her sister was faster than her.
Wow.
And also was the duathlon national champion last year. Or
It says
world
champion.
World champion, sorry. The duathlon world champion last year.
Wow.
That's Jocelyn Brea
so
for
interesting.
you. She does everything.
Everything.
At a really high level.
That's incredible.
So that's cool. Moving on to the men's steeplechase, which is also an event that's always exciting. Soufiane El Bakkali is back at it again, doing the thing that he does
Not
best,
surprised.
which is winning the steeple. His win streak now for the steeplechase is up to, I think, 9 in a row, since the last time he didn't win was 2021, so almost 2 years.
But he's not run against Girma.
Well, they've run against each other, not lately.
Early on, though. It was early on.
Yeah, well, I think Girma's the last one who beat him also. But the point is that El Bakkali has this big win streak, but Girma has the world record. And so
This
everyone's like,
season.
you got to
This
race
season.
each other.
Yeah.
Well,
they're probably waiting until the World Championships or
I
something.
don't know. El Bakkali had the Pacers set at 8 minutes, which is 7:52 is the world record. So it's it's within striking distance, but he didn't go with the Pacers. Nobody did. Who knows why? For the first K or so they did, but then they faded off of it. And then his finish, just that last lap and a half or so, he is unstoppable. So that's where it's going to be interesting to see in the World Championships what happens. Over Ethiopian Gednet Wale, who's one of the top tier runners among others in the race also.
Women's 800. I love watching this one. Mary Mora of Kenya is just strutting her stuff. She's been doing an amazing job in the 800 meter
3
run
for
in the
3.
last 4 years. Well, more than that, but you've heard her name come up quite often here. But yeah, she ran 1:56 for the victory, which is a blazing time. And as we approach the World Championships, usually these athletes are just fine-tuning and getting sharper. So she's definitely one to watch.
She's heading in the right direction right now.
Oh,
She's just been
absolutely.
getting faster with each of these contests. She's won now 3 Diamond League 800 meters, including beating Keely Hodgkinson,
Yeah.
who holds the world lead in 1:55.7, which is almost a full second faster than Mary Mora's personal best.
But when you saw them running against each other, and Keely Hodgkinson might have had an off day. She did get boxed in early on, but it did seem that Mary Mora was very strong and it was very dominant over Keely Hodgkinson in that race.
Well, this is the point I was getting to. Keely Hodgkinson runs faster than Mary Mora every season in the 800, but never beats her
Okay.
in the championship level races, which is
Says
so
being a
Keely.
good racer.
Well, I shouldn't say never. She does beat her sometimes, but she never wins the championship level races. Keely Hodgkinson, what in the world?
But she's young still, so
Yeah,
give her some slack.
and
But-
she wasn't even in this race.
Yeah,
We're talking
yeah.
about
What
her
are we
now.
talking about?
Mary Mora broke the meeting record, which almost by 2 seconds, by the way.
What?
Yes, it was one of those.
A huge chunk in the
She
800.
missed her own personal best by only about a tenth and a half, so very close to the best performance she's ever run, which is something. But then in second place, Halima Nakayi for Uganda set a new national record in 1:57 and change. And then third place, Natoya Gul Toppin from Jamaica also ran under 1:58 to make anytime you get a women's 800 with 3 runners under 1:58, that's crazy. That is
It is very
stiff
fast.
competition.
And you'll remember us talk about USA's Sage Herta Klecker, who ended up 4th, close to her personal best time of 1:58.09. Wish she could have done that at US Champs, but
Yeah.
she's still going to have a strong season, and it's great to see her on this world stage at the Diamond League. She's really been doing a lot of these Diamond League races, and she's been competitive in them, so it's very exciting.
She places well. She just there's that that next line for Herta Klecker that to be at the I can win these races level. It's not quite there consistently.
Well, it might be the sharpening speed.
We'll see.
So we'll see.
Time still will tell.
Might be the sharpening.
Now, the men's 1500 meter might have been kind of like the the headliner for the distance races.
It's just because of the people who are in it.
Well,
right?
it's because Jakob was in it again and doing what he does, which is he had the pace lights and the rabbits go out for 3:27 flat, which is 1 second off of the world record. The world record is 3:26.0 from the legendary Hisham El Garouche, which, by the way, is a 25-year-old record now.
I love it, Scott. It's got Jacob chasing.
Oh, it's good. It's good for him.
It's good.
Especially because of how hard this record is. Think about it like this. This record has stood for 25 years. Previously, prior to LG setting that record in 1998, the longest the 1500 record had stood was 7 years. So now he has put it out of reach for 25 years. Never mind the fact that a whole bunch of people think that he was cheating. There's a lot of...
No proof, though.
Well, there's a lot of things that raise questions.
Okay.
But yes, no proof. And we're not ones to ever accuse someone without proof. But it doesn't quite matter in terms of this situation because Ingebrigtsen is going for it.
He is.
But he's like going for it incrementally. So a couple weeks ago, he ran 3:27 and change high, which was his personal best at the time, European record. This time, he ran 3:27.14 for a new European record, almost a second off his personal best, which is huge at this level to chop a second off of 1500 time. That's something. And dragged along the next 8 guys or the next 7 guys to personal best times behind him.
I love it.
But get this, even in that, he won the race by 2 seconds. 2 seconds. And he put those 2 seconds on second place Abel Kipsang from Kenya. Those 2 seconds happened in the last 100 or so meters, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Like his finish was so fast in just the last 150 that he puts 2 seconds on another world-class runner that I don't even... So if Jakob's doing that at the World Championships, nobody beats him. But he might not be doing that.
Right.
Because he wasn't last time
And
around
anything
when he was vulnerable.
at these World Championships. Yeah. It's amazing how things can get shaken up.
It is that. So I said Abel Kipsang in second, ran a personal best for Kenya. And then Renaud Chariot, also of Kenya, was third in a personal best time. Andrew Coscaran of Ireland set a new national record in fourth place, running 3:30. And then it should be noted that Ingebrigtsen now has 4 Diamond League victories in the 1500. He's actually 4 for 4. He's run every 1500 in the Diamond League and won all of them. Wow. So his Diamond League standing is more than double second place's, wow. Which is, by the way, Yared Nuguse.
Yeah, Yared. I love to hear it. Well, there was more fast racing that was happening in Europe.
Yeah, so remember how we were reporting with U.S. Championships that a number of Americans finished in the top 3 but don't have world standings capable of qualifying them for the World Championships. That's either in the world ranking or the automatic world standard. So because of that, a lot of Americans are in Europe right now trying to run fast races to hit some of those times. Also, whether or not they hit the times, if they can at least improve their ranking, that might be enough. So you've got the likes of Sean McGorty traveling to Belgium to run a 5,000-meter race a week after he runs the 5,000, 10,000 double at U.S. Championships. And what does Sean McGorty do? He runs 13:02 for the world standard in the 5,000. So he hits it. He's going to World Championships for sure now, which that's got to be like, wipe the sweat off his brow.
Excited
He's
for
actually
Sean
got
McGorty.
it.
I'm sorry if that clapping hurts your ears. I'm not sure how that will come through, but I am geeked for Sean McGorty, and also that just shows how strong he is right now to have all that racing and hype of U.S. Championships, to travel to Europe, which is no small thing to do.
That is very hard to do.
And then run so fast. Like Sean McGorty, he's like showing up big, and I'm excited that he's representing Team USA. This guy is on fire and only seeming to trek better and better.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah, and it was a highly contested event. He was third behind Kenya's Cornelius Kemboi in 13 flat, and Ireland's Brian Fay, who ran 13:01 for a new Irish record as well.
A couple Irish records going down this week.
Yeah.
I love to see it.
It's good stuff. Also, just kind of a crazy note, there were 7 heats of the men's 5,000 at this meet. 7 individual heats.
Go distance running. That's what I got to say about that.
And I'm not sure why, because so there's 7 men's 5,000s, but there was only like 1 women's 5,000 and only one of basically everything else, 1 or 2 heats of basically everything else. So like everyone in Central Europe decided to run the 5,000 in Belgium that day. So that was something. All right. Also, the 1,500 meters at the meet in Belgium here, USA's Cooper Tier, who did not make the world team.
Surprise.
Because he just choked, I guess. I mean, he's been in great.
Because he can't have a good day every
day.
day.
I know, but I'm just saying he's been great, and he continues to be great now. Ran 3:33 to win the event over some strong world-class talent. So
that's a bummer timing-wise for him.
Yeah,
for sure, because that was there. I mean, obviously that was in him, the 3:33.
And then in Italy, in another 1,500 meter race, USA's Joe Wascom, who finished second in the U.S. Championships but does not have the world standard or ranking, he ran a victory, winning the race in 3:34, which still, by the way, he ran 3:34 like 0.7, and the world standard is 3:34.2. So he still missed the time. However, and this is the key, that is great, this was a major bump to his world ranking because the event is a world athletics class event, class D or C or something. And so running in the event and finishing well gives you a lot of points, which is good. Winning the event gives him a bonus, and the time itself gives him an added value. And so what happens here is Joe Wascom moves far enough up in the rankings that there's almost no way he doesn't make the team now. So that was good. Yes.
That's great. Now on to the road, where many of us are more familiar. We had the women's USATF 6K championships.
We're more familiar until you say 6K.
Right.
Who runs 6K?
I guess in cross country, not on the roads.
Even then, who runs 6K? Yeah, it's just a very uncommon distance, which makes it kind of fun.
There are some big names in this event. Emily LePerry took the lead early on with Annie Rodenfels, and then Nell Roja tucked in behind them. At some point, the pack split, and there were a few contenders that were there: Edna Kurgat and Nell Rojas, Annie Rodenfels, Emma Hurley, Emily LePerry, and Tristan Van Ord. And the group came through around 9:54 at 2 miles. And then there was some separation at 4K about. We had Hurley and Kurgat that separated a bit. But in the final kick, it actually was Nell Rojas who was the one to watch, because she ended up passing these ladies. And but Edna had a little bit too much space to make up the gap. So you found in the final results Edna Kurgat with a time of 18:31, Nell Rojas in 18:33, previous podcast guest, and then Annie Rodenfels in 18:34.
Tight finish. Nice.
It was a tight finish, and it was really like if there was more space there, Nell was coming up strong. That was impressive.
Right on. Similarly, at the same event, the men's 8K USATF championships. Once again, why do they run an 8K championship?
Why
I
are
don't
they
know.
different?
But
who knows?
As our friend Jed likes to say, 8K is the most fun event out there. 5 miles is like the perfect race distance.
Who agrees with him? Let us know. I don't know.
I like it. I don't know that I agree with him as it's the perfect race distance, but it is a lot of fun.
I've never run an 8K, so.
Yes, you have.
Have I?
You Shamrock Shuffle in Chicago?
Oh, I've run it once.
Yeah, you've done it.
Not in great shape.
Well, it doesn't matter. You just said you've never done it. So
I thank you for reminding me. I didn't remember that.
This one in particular was fast from the beginning, which is always exciting then. And it was Clayton Young who, the last time he showed up at this level to win the race was a couple years back now, wasn't it? Winning the 15K road championships, I think.
Yeah, this is his second U.S. title.
Second U.S. title for Clayton Young. And very strong finish. Had to basically outkick a whole bunch of strong finishers. Andrew Colley was second. And OSU, Oklahoma State stud, Isai Rodriguez was third.
Ooh.
And Rodriguez ran the 5,000, 10,000 double at U.S. Championships
I remember
a week
watching
ago.
him.
So, and he ran it like, he was bold. He was one of the guys
Yes.
pushing the pace at different times in these races. So he came back here a week later at the 8K on the roads, and he finished third. Didn't quite have the kick when the other two were going, and it may well be because his legs are a little bit more tired than normal, but that's good. Good running. You got the likes of Emmanuel Bohr in fourth, who was in the race. Leonard Carrier's back there. Sam Chalanga, so it's a big
Yeah,
big
lots
run.
of big names.
Good stuff.
Well, for a bonus here, we had to mention Courtney Dauwalter broke another record. So it's like a
I
month ago.
do we have
that
to mention every time she breaks a record anymore, or should we just simply say, assume every time Courtney Dauwalter runs, she's going to break the course record?
I'm just so impressed. Courtney Dauwalter.
Remember, she's the ultra marathon queen.
Well, I mean, Camille Herron also is the other.
Camille Herron's website claims to be the best ultra marathon runner in the world. It actually says that on her website.
Well, she does have the world records.
It's still untrue.
Because it's different
Courtney
races.
Dauwalter has run better than her at everything Courtney Dauwalter has done that Camille Herron has done.
Wow, you're gonna.
I am simply saying Dauwalter is the crown.
Well, the reason you cannot compare different courses.
No, it has to be it has to be on the same course.
That's why these course records are what we want to be talking about, because you can't compare these different 100-mile races. They're completely different.
Yeah,
animals.
Western States and Hard Rock 100 are not the same thing, even though they're both quote 100-mile races.
Except the thing that's similar about them is that Courtney Dauwalter now holds both course records. Yeah, so Hard Rock 100, she crushed it by over an hour.
Yeah.
And actually an hour and 4 minutes. It's a 102.5-mile course, because in these ultras, sometimes they're like, it's 100, but then it's actually a little
that's
bit more
the point.
than 100.
Yeah, you call it a 100-mile race, but it's not exactly 100 miles because they don't really care to be that precise. That's why each event is unique. You take them event by event.
Maybe a little over because, it's our like 0.1 that's over in our marathon.
No, it's not. It's not even because of that, because marathons are still all very, very close together in distance.
You're right.
100-mile races, you never know. Yeah.
So it was a 33,197-foot climb through mud and snow in San Juan, the San Juan Mountains.
Yeah. So
Very
this
difficult.
is the reason why I say Dauwalter should be viewed presently as the uncontested best female ultra runner in history, because the course record times that she's running, she's not just besting some of the things that Camille Herron has done, she's besting them by leaps and bounds. Like, we're talking an hour better on the same course types of things.
But I don't know.
more.
Did she hold the previous record? I'm
not
sure.
saying she did. I'm just saying that's the caliber of improvement Dauwalter's doing.
Or they just have their different niches.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to be contentious on purpose, because that's what
you like to get people fired up.
Well, anyway, what it comes down to here is that Dauwalter is just crushing things right now. It was 3 weeks ago that she ran the Western States course record. So 3 weeks apart, 200-mile races, and they're both best ever. By tons.
Yep. She claimed this record even though she ran off course at mile 87 and she had to go back and correct. So she actually ran a little bit longer.
Is that the part where she jumped in the taxi cab and they drove her near the finish?
That would make more sense than this mind-blowing time that she ran. Now, second place was Anne-Lise Rosette-Surget of France, and she actually led the race for the first 64 miles, but she ended up finishing over an hour after Dauwalter. So Dauwalter was running really strong through that second half.
Well, when you're talking about 37, 38 more miles to go, a lot can happen.
A lot can happen.
Yep.
Yeah, she ended up putting a lot of time on her, but if my math is right, it looks like. Oh, no. Okay. So she ran just off the previous course record in Lise.
Okay.
Yep.
She didn't run
faster than the previous record. But I do want to mention, because this is a really odd thing about this event, that they run it alternating each year, going a different direction.
Yeah.
So,
that's not too uncommon in the ultra or trail world. Okay.
Well, Dauwalter now owns both course records for both. She set the clockwise record last year, and now she has the counterclockwise record.
All right. Just in case anyone's keeping track.
Exactly. Well, I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing about the race.
Everything's interesting. It's good. So here you have it. All of the things that you wanted to know about running in the last several days. And amongst those things, your own running endeavors and efforts, as we're trying to address that in our running form conversation, just keep in mind that that's the kind of thing that is best done with help, whether it's a second set of eyes, a friend, or a mirror, or if you want to seek a little bit more additional support with that, you certainly are we are glad for you to reach out we can help you where we can.
Or questions about it for our
Questions about it for
podcast
our
episode
upcoming by going to AtoZrunning.com/question.
And remember also to go to AtoZrunning.com/free for that pre-run routine.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.